Talking to some of the most iconic women in music. They all have a story of at some point where they realized that their gender played a role. What I do want this to be is a place where the female experience can be heard. You see the music world and hear music through a different lens. And that's what this show is about, is giving women the opportunity to be heard and talk about how much they love music. I'm Lori Majewski, and this is Fierce Women in Music.
Welcome to another Fierce Women in Music. I'm your host, Lori Majewski. My guest today is an artist who's been in music for a long time, 31 years now. Sia started out as part of a band, and then she was a solo act, and she gained a big following in her native Australia. Here in the U.S., though, Sia, S-I-A, she really began to make a name for herself, writing gigantic hits for big-name collaborations. You remember this one, Titanium with David Guetta.
You shut it out, but I can't hear a word you say. I'm talking loud, not saying much.
Sia also co-wrote one of Rihanna's biggest, and I think it's her best as well, Diamonds.
Fine light in the beautiful sea, I chose to be happy. You and I, we're like diamonds in the sky. You're a shooting star, I see, a vision of ecstasy. When you hold me,
If you got to hear the demo for Diamonds, you would hear Sia singing it, and she really laid out the blueprint for Rihanna. And when Rihanna recorded it, she barely diverged from Sia's take on it at all.
fine light in the beautiful sea, I choose to be happy. You and I, we're like diamonds in the sky. You're a shooting
Oh, and I should also mention Wild Ones with Flo Rida.
Hey, I heard you are a wild one. Ooh, if I took you home and be a home run, show me how you do. I wanna shut down the club.
After the litany of collaborations, Sia decided to really reintroduce herself here in America, and she released her sixth album, but it's the one that broke her as a pop star in her own right here in the U.S. That album was 1,000 Forms of Fear, and it gave us the #1 hit song, Sia's signature song, the Grammy-nominated Chandelier.
Gonna swing from the chandelier, from the chandelier. I'm gonna live like tomorrow doesn't exist, like it doesn't exist.
It was right before Chandelier that Sia began to wear her signature blonde wig. She wanted to hide her face from the world, and ironically, it made her a superstar. These days, Sia is so unstoppable that the Christmas album she released in 2017 was one of the most streamed in 2020. In fact, that Christmas album and her long list of hits have made her one of the top 10 most streamed artists on the entire planet. So what do you do then? What do you do for an encore? If you are Sia, you write and direct a movie starring Oscar nominee Kate Hudson and Tony and Grammy winner Leslie Odom Jr. Sia's musical drama is called Music, and it will play in select IMAX theaters for one night only. That'll be on February 10th. And after that, it'll be released on premium video on-demand platforms. That'll be starting February 12th. The movie Music centers around an autistic teen named Music, and she's played by Dance Mom star Maddie Ziegler, who is also the young woman who dons the blonde wig while standing in for Sia in her music videos. The decision to cast Maddie instead of an actual autistic teen caused quite a commotion for Sia on Twitter, even though her detractors had yet to see the movie or Maddie's performance. Furthermore, Sia's knee-jerk attempt to defend herself helped to make headlines around the world. But I hope the incident doesn't take away from the fact that Sia has decided to shine a light on autism and what it's like for families who live with it. All right, let's get to it. Sia and I talk about the movie, the controversy, the music, the wig, of course, and so much more. Here she is, fierce woman in music, Sia.
We can take it high. I can't hear the thunder coming from your mouth, and I know my number's up. Give me some CV wonder. Click, put it on before we go under. I can't see the lightning coming from your ears. Yeah, I see your
You know, when I'm about to talk to you, a few people said to me, they're like, which Sia are you going to get? Are you going to get Sia with a wig? Are you going to get Sia without a wig? I'm kind of looking at the real Sia. Am I? She says
This
no.
is a wig. This is a wig. These are prosthetics. This is the director.
Prosthetics?
But the thing is I wanted to be able to express myself because we're talking about feelings and, I wanted to make a movie with feelings. And so we got to talk about feelings. And I would have felt really silly talking through the crazy bangs. And so I just threw together a new identity, which is actually me, the person Sia, but this isn't what I look like.
That's
So
incredible.
we would call it like lowercase. You're talking to lowercase Sia, not Sia the pop star with a capital S. But I have, I still don't want to be famous. So I've managed to do some special effects.
You know what's crazy about that is I've long said that you wearing a wig is the most genius thing because then you don't have to sit in a hair and makeup chair for all those hours. And instead you do because you put prosthetics in. How long did it take you?
Less than an hour.
Okay, well, it still wasn't instant. Wow. Wow. I often say that there hasn't been a female president yet, and the reason is because of hair and makeup.
I agree with you. Like I had one where it wasn't on camera and I was like, great, excellent. I'm going to take my jacket off and spread my legs. And I did a 44-minute interview and I was like, I'm doing this. Now I'm doing the splits. It was awesome.
Even in your movie, in music, you are in a mask. I mean, not a COVID mask. You're in a green face mask. So this is 10 years on. It's been 10 years since you donned the wig for the first time. You're as serious about this as ever.
Oh, yeah. Nobody needs to be famous. I mean, well, everybody wants to be famous. They went and did a bunch of studies at schools and they found that, they asked the children what they wanted to be when they grew up and 90% of them said famous. And, when they said what for, they just said, oh, just famous. But nobody really understands what fame is until it happens to them. And then it's like immediate regret. Unless you're someone who really does feed off attention. And there are people like that who are good at being famous, who are really, that it's totally casual to them. It doesn't make them anxious. They're totally thick-skinned or they enjoy it. It makes them feel important. But I'm just not one of those people. For me, it just gives me anxiety.
But it's funny because when you started wearing the wig and covering your face back in 2011,
But I got the most famous.
Yeah, well, that's the irony.
Kind of a marketing. I mean, I did have an idea because I was like, what's the only thing missing in pop music? And it was mystery, because everyone was taking their Instagram to the gynecologist with them. And so I was like, whoa, how can I put out this record so I can be out of my publishing deal, so I can get a better publishing deal, but not have to be the artist? And that was 1,000 Forms of Fear. And that was when I just put the blonde bob on the front cover. And I had no idea that Chandelier would be so successful. And I thought I was just going to spooge out that record. It was going to do nothing. And that I was then going to be able to get a better publishing deal because I'd started writing songs for other people and songs that were evergreens and that I would be able to get a great publishing deal. But what happened is that Chandelier became a huge success, I think mostly in part due to the video and Maddie's fans and the magic between Ryan, Maddie, myself, and Daniel Askill, who was my co-director for that video and for all the music videos after that. I always worked with Daniel Askill. And this movie is the first thing I ever directed by myself. And I was really scared, but I got the courage up and I did it. And now I realized I always wondered, am I just a singer with good ideas or am I a director? And we'd say co-directed by Sia and Daniel Askill. But I wondered, like, are they doing that thing where they let me pretend that I'm the director, you know, just to stroke my ego or to keep me happy? Or I wasn't sure. But now I know I'm a director. So I feel really, really excited and happy just that this movie is going to come out.
Well, yeah. I mean, especially during COVID, but you have right now a captive audience who seem to be really into music shows, music documentaries. You know, there might be a silver lining in music coming out online.
Oh, who knows? I mean, well, I'm lucky enough that it's come out on the big screen in Australia, and it will be coming out on the big screen anywhere where the country is open. And we are still going to put it out on IMAX here, but we're just going to wait until it's safe. And actually, the only people who'll see it before then are people who are members of, I guess, the HFPA, the voting community, because we've sent them screeners.
World, I want to leave you better. I want my life to matter.
Let me take a moment to reintroduce you. If you're just tuning in, this is Fierce Women in Music, and I'm talking with the fierce singer-songwriter Sia. She is also the screenwriter and movie director and producer of the new film Music. You know, one of my closest friends has a child who is autistic, and he is around 5 or 6 years old. He can't speak, but he can sing every song on the A Star is Born soundtrack. And a lot of people don't know, unless you know someone personally that has a situation, has a child in their life like this. A lot of people don't understand. Is that one of the reasons that you wanted to do this movie? Because I have to say, Sia, autism is a word we hear a lot, but very few people understand it.
Yeah, it was because friends of mine who had adult, like children with autism, didn't know the stuff that I had started researching. They were unaware of all of the latest research. And I realized that there's, you know, people don't have the resources that I had, certainly, in order to try and, you know, find out as much as I could about nonverbal, echolalia, that level of functioning on the spectrum. I thought, and I was like so excited because I wanted people to know, because I developed a relationship with someone who was nonverbal, and it was a deep, deep friendship. And I knew that he was inside there, and whilst he didn't speak, I knew that we were friends, and I knew that we had a relationship. And I felt like once I learned that they can understand everything you're saying, and that it's actually, you know, there's so many people that are like talking about the subject as if they aren't in the room, and yet the subject understands everything that everybody's talking about, and they may not in that moment, but, you know, 2 weeks later it may download into the mainframe and they'll understand what that conversation from 2 weeks ago was about. But like, just nobody knew that. And I finally found this book written by a nonverbal girl on the spectrum whose dad had helped her type it out. And so she tells you what it's like to be inside the body of a nonverbal girl on the autism spectrum. So, you know, that was my dream, was to like just to educate and bring light to lots of things like the healthcare system and alcoholism and mental illness, and also you know, the caregiving and also autism. But what happened is that I didn't realize that there were so many factions and subcommittees. I thought I had gone and talked to every autism community that there was, and that I had asked, how they should be referenced, how they wanted to be referenced, how that I should say this, how I should use this language and that language. And they were telling me all the ways that I was supposed to use language. And then I found out afterwards that I had basically missed out on the other 50% of subcommittees that wanted the opposite. And just like, they say once you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, I found out that in order to have pleased everybody, I would have had to speak to every single person with autism, because each of them want a different thing. Some people don't like to be called autistic. They like to be called a person with autism. Some people don't like to be called special needs. They like to be called special abilities. And other people don't like to be called special abilities. They like to be called disabled. And I now know so much more than I knew like a month ago. And so I thought I had done all the research that I could have possibly done. And then I realized that I don't think you ever can do, you could never do enough research, because you literally have to speak to every single person and ask what their preference is.
Yeah, you shouldn't get down on yourself, Sia, because honestly, in watching that movie, I learned so much. And I have a personal relationship. I know someone who has a son that is autistic. And I have to say, I think this movie is, I know you made it in 2017, but you would have gotten criticism no matter how much research you did. If you did speak to 90% of the autistic community, you still would have gotten it, because I think we're having the conversation now because of the little bit of hot water that you got into. But yeah, it's an accusation. That's what Twitter does, is they accuse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, although I have to admit to, that to being ableist to a degree, I mean, I'm not proud of it. I did work with someone who was neuroatypical. I originally cast Maddie, worked with someone who was neuroatypical. It was really difficult. And her mother said, I would never put her through this. And I was
You mean being in the film?
To play music. And I was happy to be able to cast Maddie again, because I love working with her, and and so maybe I have to admit I'm a little bit ableist, and also I view her as, she's like a daughter to me, so I'm also a nepotist. Like I'm also definitely accidentally racist. I think every white person is. I know that there's a lot of things that I would like to be better about myself. And I think that I got prickly because it had only been a 1-minute teaser that had been put out. And I broke a couple of rules. I tweeted after midnight. And I also was a little bit facetious. And I think I hurt someone's feelings. And that I was really trying to be cheeky, but it was a bit of an asshole thing to say to someone who was saying, well, I could have played that role. And I just said, well, maybe you're just not a very good actor. And I thought that was
sarcasm
funny.
Does not come through on Twitter, Sia.
I know that now, because I was just like, I remember I got one tweet back saying, you are a bad person with a bad attitude, and maybe you're a bad everything. And I was like, oh God. So yeah, I mean, I've learned my lesson. I wish I'd never really said anything, to be honest. But although if I hadn't, I wouldn't have learned so much, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. So
I think the bigger people are the ones who learn. I mean, when I talked to David Byrne about not employing a single woman among 25 musicians for American Utopia, he said to me, it was a year on, he said, I'm glad, because he's like, it taught me I have a lot to learn. But let's talk about Maddie and her performance, because it is incredible. It is incredible what she does. And I mean, let's start with, why did you call the character Music? As a host of a music show, and you're a musician, there's real meaning to the name of the character being Music.
Well, it came actually later in the screenwriting process, and in turning it into a musical from a narrative film, I realized I had a song that I'd written 10 years ago called Music. And it's the song that Kate Hudson sings in the wallpapered room. And I realized that that was the most musical song that I'd ever written, like in terms of a musical. And it just all fell together. I was like, oh my God, that's going to be the key musical number. I'm going to call the character Music, and the movie is going to be called Music, because why hasn't that already been done? I don't understand. And it's so simple. Everything felt so simple, and it all locked in that moment. And so it was this song that inspired me to call her Music and the movie Music, because the song was called Music, but it was so old, 10 years old.
Well, and the idea that this child, this teenager, music is constantly playing in her ears in the headphones, and that music takes her black and white world and turns it color. That was what was so beautiful. And I know you added the music video scenes later. You were talking about that, but it lets us see inside her brain. And there's a sentence in the movie where it talks about how they see things, these children who are on the spectrum, they see things in a completely different way.
Yeah. And I think like anyone with anything that's different from typical, it's a gift and a curse. And I wanted to represent someone who would generally be considered cursed as extremely gifted. Like, her imagination is magical. And I want to challenge people's preconceptions about what's happening inside the mind of their nonverbal child or adult brother or family member, friend. You know, I thought it would be interesting to challenge that.
Do you also feel that, so music kind of, the songs and melody, they help her express? And it just made me even think about myself and you know, just how music has been so life-changing and life-saving for so many people. Yeah.
And what I also intended was that she was especially gifted at noticing subtext within the relationships of the people that she was near, and those little glances and what she was able, you know, to take in her head. The musical pieces always supported the narrative, or the pushing forward of romance, or the pushing forward of the next act, you know. And I did shoot all the musicals at the same time as the narrative. But what I did do is at the very end, once we'd edited it, I went back and I rewrote any lyrics that I thought would support the narrative better.
Let's take a quick break. Stay right there. When we get back, more of my conversation with Sia.
Fierce Women in Music with Lori Majewski. We'll be right back.
On Volume, Channel 106.
Welcome back to Fierce Women in Music with Lori Majewski.
On Volume, Channel 106.
Welcome back to Fierce Women in Music. I'm Lori Majewski, and let's get right back to my interview with the pop star and first-time movie maker, Sia.
Come on, turn the radio on. It's Friday night, and I won't be long. Gotta do my hair.
As I was saying about Maddie, she did a phenomenal job, and you've taken her from being a music video star. She's already a star dancer. She could be a movie star now. And the irony is, even as you hid your face, she stood in for you as your avatar. How has fame been on her? How has fame been to her? Is she okay?
Yeah, apparently she's okay. I didn't ever think that Chandelier was going to be as big as it was, as success as it was. And, while she was already in Dance Mums, being dressed like a little hooker, I regret putting her in a nude leotard. Like, I wanted it to be completely all about her face, her facial expressions, and the movement. And so I put her in a classic nude leotard. But I realize now that I'm just as much to blame, I think, as that show for sexualizing her. And that was not my intention. In fact, I went through the choreography 3 times and removed like at least 30 to 40% of the original choreography because it felt like it was too sexy. And Ryan and I worked together to make it more like clunky, like woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown, gorilla through a toddler's eyes. Like we worked together and continued to work together to try and make sure that all of Maddie's music videos were not objectifying. But I have had a lot of uncomfortable talks with myself about, not wanting to be famous. And then did I throw Maddie to the wolves? Did I throw Maddie to the wolves? And I can honestly say I didn't think that Chandelier would be as successful as it was. But I talked to her about it, and I talk to her every time we ever do a project together. I talk to her. I say, "Do you want to do this? How are you? How are you dealing with fame? She's been famous since she was 6 years old, and she's actually relatively comfortable with it. There have been times where she's found it difficult. And so, me and her mum, we talk about how we can make it easier for her so she's not as exposed to, just necessarily even having to go to the dance conventions and then take 1,000 selfies with people. She said she experienced depersonalization during the last time she did that. So I just begged Melissa, like, let's try and have her doing much less press, much less things that involve her having to have like one-on-one contact with fans, because that was what disturbed my serenity too, is that I'm so spongy that if someone would meet me and they would be really excited, I would like give them a hug and say, "Everybody poops." And then they would leave feeling really calm, and I would be like really like anxious. So I would sort of absorb their nerves. And I've always been really absorbent, and so is Maddie. She's an absorbent person.
And empathetic. I mean, that's empathy, because Sia, I saw a tweet from you recently where you were like, "I love you guys, take care." So you're so empathetic. There must be a push-pull, because you want to be there for people and you want to be loving toward your fans, but you can't give too much of yourself because then they take that from you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have had to just learn really, really good boundaries. And now I'm really, really good at it. And if somebody wants to say hello, I'm totally comfortable with that. If they want to take a photo, it depends on what the situation is, but I'm either totally comfortable doing that, or I'll say, actually, you know what? I don't want anyone to know that we're here. So how about a hug? And I also am fiercely protective of Maddie. I provide her 24-hour security because I feel responsible for her ensuing fame. And even when we're together, if someone comes up, often, they think I'm her mum, and they're like, "Oh, hi, how are you, Maddie's mum? Can you take a picture of us together?" And I'll check, and I can tell from Maddie's face whether she wants to do it or she doesn't. And so I either say, oh, actually, no, we're not supposed to be in town, or we're not doing photos today, or, or actually we're just having some family time, or if I can see that she's like in a laissez-faire mood, then I'll say, sure. But yeah, we are similar, but she is much, much stronger psychologically than I am. Like, she's just much, much, much better at being famous than I am. And so
Wow.
I always say, if you want it to stop, it stops. Like, I'll take you to art class or cooking classes. And, she's finished school now. She's 18. She can do whatever she wants,
Well, next she's going to be in the Spielberg movie. She's going to be in West Side Story. I mean, she's only going to become a bigger and bigger star.
Well, I want to tell you a story. So I sent Spielberg music to watch. He'd already cast Maddie in West Side Story, and it was a very small role, and it was as a background dancer. But Maddie loves to work, and she said yes. And then he saw music, and he was like, I don't think she should do it. It's too small a role. This is terrible. She's going to win. She should win an Oscar for this role. I talked to Maddie about it, and she said, I just really love working and I love dancing. I just really want to do it. So I called him back and said, she really wants to do it. She just wants to do it. And so he was like, okay, well, I promise I'm going to try and put her in the middle of every frame I can. Like,
wow.
Yeah. No, it's actually, it's a very small role. So music is still her biggest role to date. And I've basically been just saying to her, take some time for yourself, relax, because when music comes out, I think you're going to get a lot of offers and you may not need to audition anymore, and can be very rejecting. And we talk about that as well and how it affects her. And I guess the best thing that Maddie and I have going on is just that we communicate, and that if she's ever uncomfortable, I'm going to take her out of the situation, and that she knows she can tell me the truth if she's uncomfortable with the situation.
Wow. I'm listening to you talk, and you sound like her mom. You sound like her mom. And
her mom shares her with me.
Yes,
her mom's,
but you have those like maternal instincts with her.
I do. It's weird. It's the day I met her, I saw she danced the dance, and I cried, and I felt like when people say that they give birth to their first child and they never knew they could love someone so much, and they experience this kind of like opening of their eyes that they never thought they could love someone so much, so profoundly. And that was what happened to me the day that I saw her do the chandelier dance in her little black leotard for the first time in rehearsals. And I just was like so blown away by her. And I thought, she's going to be incredibly successful, and I'm afraid for her. And so I continuously just ask Melissa, thank you, thanks for letting me share I'm infertile. So being able to express my maternal side with Maddie has been really special for me. And I'm really grateful to her mom for allowing me to do so, because, a lot of other people would probably find that threatening, and she doesn't.
Do you think that relationship with Maddie informed your decision to adopt 2 children?
Yeah.
I have
Definitely.
to tell you that I read about your story, and I'm currently fostering to adopt a Black boy and a biracial boy, actually. And I read that story and I thought, what an interesting time for us to be doing this, Sia, in the world, because I imagine you have the same fears that I do, the same, you worry about the future like any mom would, but then you're also worrying about you being white, them being Black, the world treating them like they're Black. I hope this isn't too personal for you, but it was something that when I knew I was going to talk to you, I was like, my gosh, we share that.
It scares the shit. This is Dingus. It scares the shit out of me. I don't want my kids to get killed. And they're, both 19. Oh, honey, you can't chew on the bone in here because it's too loud. Want to take it outside? David, will you take the bone outside for Dingus or put it on the bed and we can eat it in there and we can close the door? I talk to my dog like a little baby. Sorry, Dingus, I took the bone because we're doing an interview. Yeah, you can stay here with me. Whatever you want.
I have to say, I keep looking at you and you look like Drew Barrymore in your prosthetics.
God bless you. I love her.
Now I see it. I didn't when we first logged on, but now I see it. Anyway,
The corner of my mouth.
Yes.
A little bit more. Is it to the right side or to the left? I'm not sure. I love her. She's awesome.
Me too. So that derailed a very serious question, but you said you were worried, as I am.
Absolutely. Just totally, terrified, and they've had their training but my sons are gangbangers. They are. And they have lived in 26 different homes each. And they're really scared. They have major trust issues, major abandonment issues, and a lot of history of trauma. And they've had to join gangs to survive, because the foster care system will give you $14 a week pocket money. And if you are late to school because transport doesn't show up to take you to school, and you have to walk to school and you're late to school, you'll get a penalty of $7. So you'll end up with $7 pocket money a week. You can't even buy a Happy Meal with that. So most of the kids in group homes and foster care are gangbanging or dealing drugs, or it's a system designed by a corrupt and racist government. It's like a pipeline. It's a pipeline to make sure they all end up in jail doing slave labor, and that is what disgusts me so much. When I found that out, I just felt rage. And then I felt fortunate that, fame is a gift and a curse, but at least I have a platform and I can try and do something to change the way that the foster system operates. Who knows how little, maybe even if I can change it 1%, it might, it would be meaningful to me, and I know it would be meaningful to my children.
I'm right there with you. It's an interesting thing because there's also a bit of Annie to it, isn't it? Like your Daddy Warbucks, kind of.
My favorite. That was my favorite musical growing up. Grease 1 and Annie. And, I totally fucked up. The first 3 months when I adopted them, I was fully Daddy Warbucks. I was like, you want a PS4? You want an Xbox? You want 15 pairs of trainers? Yeah. And then,
well, you do that for strangers. You may as well do it for your sons.
And I was just like, it felt so good. And but then I realized that that's not what they needed. They needed me to say no. They needed me to say no. I love you too much to let you do this. Oh my gosh,
so amazing. All right, well, let's move on to a very important topic. Your uncle is from Men at Work.
He's not my real uncle, but growing up, we called him Uncle. I called him Uncle Collie. He was a friend of the family.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah, Colin Hay. I come from a land down under. Yeah, and he a really good old family friend, and I did call him Uncle Collie. I did visit him in New York when I was a child. I was 12. I flew solo from Australia, and I visited him in New York because I had some money from an accident that I'd been in when I was like 3 that had been getting interest. So I had $2,500 in the bank account from an accident where I lost some of my sight. And he said, probably jokingly, when he was over for dinner, I was about 11, he said, yeah, we're in New York. You should come visit sometime. And I went, can I come visit? And I used the money from that, and I went and stayed with him for 3 weeks in in New York. And I remember at the time he was doing more his solo stuff. And but he did have to go to I believe it was the Grammys, or it was an award ceremony. And I just wanted to go in the limousine, and I was watching the ceremony on a little television in the limousine, and I was just eating all the candies in the limousine parked outside the venue. And I remember thinking to myself, and I'm watching him on the TV, and I remember thinking to myself, this seems like a pretty good job. And if only I really understood that, it is a good job. I'm lucky. But that if you have any kind of, trauma history or any mental illness, that you think being famous, you'll suddenly become cool, or even self-esteem issues. You think that when you hit fame, you're going to be different. You're going to be everything that you've always wanted to be. You're going to be lovable and likable and more beautiful, and whatever these things are that you have insecurities about, you're going to believe that you aren't going to have those insecurities once you finally hit the big time. And what happens is you hit the big time and nothing happens and you feel exactly the same way, and you realize it's an inside job, that you can't go back and fix whatever was broken when you were 3 or 4. You can't fix your terrible self-esteem by being famous. It doesn't work. It's a hollow victory. And so I think that's why so many people, when they actually get famous, just go off the rails, because we all have this expectation that it's going to make us more lovable and whole and cool. I don't know, all the great things. That's going to just make us all the great things. And when you realize that it's a completely shallow victory, it can be really disturbing. And
now, see, I see that you've completely succeeded. You are sober. You are a mom. You are a philanthropist. You are now a director and a screenwriter. And, David Bowie once said, I wish myself to be a prop for my songs. And that's what you are. You are more, really, your songs are so big. If you think about the last decade, Chandelier, one of the most important pop songs of the last decade, and you're in the top 10 most streamed artists in the world. So to hear you talk like that.
And I don't do any promo. Like, I haven't been on tour in 5 years. I don't know. Like, it's just funny. It's funny to me. I feel very blessed. I definitely feel very blessed that I organized my life this way, because, like, a lot of my friends are out on the road constantly doing press, and, and they're also in the top 10. And I just feel really lucky that I've chosen to do this promo, because this movie means a lot to me. It's the most important thing I've ever done to me. And that's why I'm out promoting it with my funny little face on.
Well, do you foresee now doing more music, or do you feel, and I don't mean music part 2, unless the world demands it, of course, but it feels like, I ask everyone, what has COVID meant to you? But it feels like your life right now, it feels like the downtime is meant to be there.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it nearly killed me making the movie. It was really hard. It really was hard. The editing process was just really, really hard. Like, my suicidal ideation came back during the editing process. I had to start seeing a new psychiatrist who re-diagnosed me, who said I'd been misdiagnosed with bipolar 2, and I was suffering from complex PTSD. And then, and that my frontal cortex was effed. And so if I started to take Prozac, the suicidal ideation might stop. And it did. 6 days into taking Prozac, it stopped, and I haven't had it since. But yeah, I mean, this was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And it's the most important thing I've ever done. The reason I'm out here now promoting it is because of that. It's because I care about it. I want people to see it. I want people to understand more about each of these unique characters and about each of their communities. So, you know,
But you're one of the most in-demand songwriters in the world. Did you just say, hold my call from Rihanna, hold my call from Beyonce? Like, is there now a demand for you to do this stuff, but you just have to tune it out?
No, not really. I mean, the shoot was only 40 days long, and then during the edit, I did write some songs, and you know, I'd write once or twice a week, and I'm getting better at choosing tracks that are singles. And so the more I write, the better I get at choosing or writing singly type chords. And of course, I just get faster and faster just with practice. And so there's no real demand. I mean, is there? There's no demand, is there? People probably just email and say, have you got anything? We're going to make an album like this.
I would say there's demand. I would say you're consistently asked.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's demand, but but
You're
I didn't know
Sia.
that. Yeah, I didn't know about it, and that's why I love my managers.
Well, seriously, this has been amazing, and I know you're going to be around for so many years because if you keep wearing that wig, you can age forever, and you'll always be 21.
The wig never ages.
That's right. Honestly, I know it's been a long day for you. This means a lot to me, and you are a fierce woman in music. I'm so proud to have you as part of the series.
Thank you so much, Lori. Take care.
Congrats on the movie.
Thank you.
Another one bites the dust. Oh, why can I not conquer love? And I might have thought we were one.
Well, there you have it, the fierce Sia.For, otherwise just known as Sia. For someone who's cultivated so much mystique, she certainly doesn't hold back, huh? She's such a generous interviewee, but I guess she's just generous, period. She adopted those 2 teenagers who were about to age out of the foster care system, and she did that in 2019. And then last year, she goes to Walmart and a TJ Maxx, and she starts paying shoppers tabs. And we're talking about small hauls, but also like big screen TVs. And the funny thing is, Sia didn't even say who she was. She made herself out to be this regular person who just had won the lottery and walked into Walmart that day. So again, Sia's new movie, it's called Music. It's going to open in select IMAX theaters for one night only on February 10th, and then it'll be released to video-on-demand platforms starting February 12th, so you can watch it from home. Now, one thing to know, Sia isn't a big musicals person, even though she just made one. So don't expect people to start breaking out into songs in their kitchen or whatever. The musical moments are more like little interludes. They're like colorful music videos that will give you an idea of what is going on in the characters' heads. And oh, by the way, watch closely. You don't want to miss the Henry Rollins cameo. If you missed any of this fierce interview with Sia, just go back and listen to it on demand, or go and check out one of the many other fierce interviews. Maybe you missed the Alanis Morissette one, or the Nancy Wilson one, or one of our earliest, Ann Wilson. All you have to do is download the SiriusXM app if you haven't done so already. It's free to most subscribers, and I want to hear what did you think of this episode? Who do you want to hear next on Fierce? Just hit me up on Twitter at Lori Majewski at SiriusXM Volume. I'd love to hear from you. Well, that's it for now. Until next time, stay fierce.
Help, I have done it again. I have been here many times before. Hurt myself again today. And